Extroverted sensing, SE, is a function that I use and that half the types use in their conscious parts of their mind. I don't think it gets really enough kind of a deeper explanation of how it actually operates in a person. I think the sensation functions don't really get enough attention paid to them by most of the intuitive people that are involved in typology. They're all kind of focused on the idea that intuition is better because of the sort of classist nature of human beings, of wanting to think that they're better or worse than someone else. It really, everyone uses sensation all day, every day, and everyone uses intuition all day, every day. It's a question of how prevalent it is in your mind and what its role is in your daily life. Extroverted sensing, the best way that I can describe it is that it's very connected to the exterior of your human body. Okay? So, for instance, I'm an ISTP. I'm an SP, temperament person, if you read any of Kiersey's books. And for me, I've always been fascinated by the differences between people in terms of how they connect to the world, because it's very different than me. For instance, SI people, SJ types, have a totally different perspective on reality than I do. They're much more deeply connected to the inside of their body than the outside. They're not as kinesthetic. So most SP types are highly in tuned to our physical environment and to tactile sensations and visual sensations and hearing and all the other senses. But it's really very much, SE is connected to visual and kinesthetic. And particularly the outside of your body. So most people that have SE, even the NJ types that all have it, INTJ, ENTJ, INFJ, ENFJ, have a very strong connection to their physical appearance. Okay? And you could say that everyone has a connection to their physical appearance, which is true. Some people it's much less than others, ENTPs have SE 8th, so to them, they have a different relationship to their appearance than a lot of other people. Same with ENFPs. But people that have SE in their top 4 functions have a pretty strong connection to being healthy, to being fit, to being attractive physically, externally, more so than people with SI who are more concerned about consistency in their appearance. At least that's been my experience. An SE user is much more likely to have a strong connection to how they look in the mirror. Very often. How your skin looks, how your hair looks, how your moving parts of your body feel. Like a lot of SFP types work in kinesiology in one way or another. That's been my experience. Like a lot of physical therapists I've noticed are SFPs. A lot of people that work in sports medicine or personal training are SFPs. It's like a work with your hands type of function. So you'll find that again, it's very, like I said, it's very much connected to the outside part of your body and how your body moves and functions. Where introverted sensing is more connected to the inside of your body and how you are experiencing things over and over. It's like an internal sense of consistency based on the past, versus extroverted sensing is what you are experiencing right now, all around you. Like an extroverted sensing type, like myself, will notice a lot of small details everywhere around them. And it's not purely like they're looking for flaws. I've noticed that SI types, SJs, tend to see a lot of flaws in life through their sensing function because they're noticing lack of consistency. They're noticing that something is not following a predictable pattern. Like, that's not where it goes. You know, that person's sitting in the wrong chair. They usually sit in this chair. What's going on? Why are they doing that? Where the SE person is more like, I'm sitting in this chair because I feel like sitting in this chair today. You know, I want something different. SE people like variety a lot. I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, we're scatterbrained and that we have to have something different every single day, but what I'm saying is that SE is more likely to enjoy variety than SI. And SE users are also more likely to do things that are riskier or more physically intense or physically challenging than probably any other type. I've noticed that even people that have SE inferior, like INFJs and INTJs, are often very intense athletic people. They over-exercise a lot. Like, they run too much, or they do too much CrossFit, or they have ridiculously high levels of over athleticism and over focus on it when SE is being overutilized as their fourth function. That's been my experience. For me, it's sort of like it's my second function, so it's, you know, there's a bunch of different names for it. I just like calling it the second function. The second function is kind of supposed to be loosely regarded as your biggest growth in life from things that I've read. There's a lot of different people that have a lot of different opinions on what type development amounts to, what individuation means, what shadow work means. There's so many different schools of thought. I'm trying to keep it simple because I had to spend over a decade, like 13 years, trying to understand all this stuff. And it wasn't easy. Okay. But for me, my connection to extroverted sensing is very often a need for something to happen. Okay. A word that's used by like PhD level people to describe something like this is incidence, which is like a need for something to happen. It's a need for some kind of energetic feeling that makes me feel alive. Okay. Most ISTPs, in fact, everyone that I've ever met, will tell you this same concept in a slightly different way, each one. But it's essentially, if I sit around and I don't do much for any longer period of time, I become kind of dejected and feel like I'm a failure, or I'm worthless, whatever, insert your favorite adjective there for those types of feelings, you know, and the answer is usually to go do something. That's what SE involves, is doing. Like, you know, particularly I've noticed that ESFPs and ESTPs can live in almost a constant state of needing to be active and doing something. ESFPs, it's a little bit more refined than ESTPs, but they're still very active people. And most of the ISTPs and ISFPs that I've encountered in my life, as we get older, it gets even worse, where if we're not doing something all the time, we feel down. And, you know, a lot of people talk about function looping. That's another whole concept that's too long for this video. But even the simple act of going and doing something when I'm feeling not that great enriches my experience as a person, and it can sort of reset me because it's my second function. And, you know, the more energizing that it is, the better that I tend to feel. It can be a little bit of a slippery slope of that you can fall into doing things that are not the smartest thing on earth, but it doesn't really have to be that. You know, it doesn't have to be me riding a motorcycle down the freeway at 100 miles an hour to feel alive. I mean, that works, don't get me wrong, but it can be something as simple as going and taking in a lot of sensory experience. Like walking through a mall, for instance, or walking through something that is very colorful, very sort of sense-inducing, something that brings about a lot of sort of opening of my eyes and me wanting to look at everything and take everything in. Or something where I feel it all over my body, like going swimming, where the water touches the exterior of my skin the whole time, is an interesting feeling. And it makes you feel better, and moving your physical body makes you feel better. Because, like I said, SE is very kinesthetic. And the hardest thing for SE people is when we're physically injured and can't do much, or are recovering from injuries and can't do much. At least that's been my experience. The big thing is, like I said, it's a deep connection to the exterior of your body. So it might seem like vanity in that regard to people that have a much lower connection to the inside of their body. Like, I have a close friend who's an INFP, and I would talk to her about how I essentially cannot walk by a mirror without looking into it. And she would say, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah, really." And it's not essentially pure vanity. In other words, it's not simply that I'm self-involved. It's that SE is concerned with the functionality of the outside of the human body. That's been my experience, and I've had this reinforced from some other people in the type community that I've talked to when I used to go to in-person typology meetings years ago, before COVID shut it all down, unfortunately. So I think that describes it pretty well. You know, you can think of it, like I said, that it's sort of a kinesthetic and highly, like I like to run, for an example. I've run thousands of miles in my life, barefoot on the beach. And I like running barefoot on the beach because I feel the sand under my feet every step that I take. I like seeing all of the detail of how different the beach is every time that I go. because it's different every single time based on the way the tide comes in and what the tide brings in or brings out, how strong it is, the way the sand reforms, what's exposed, what's not exposed, the level of the sand versus the cliffs, whatever bugs are laying there on the beach, whatever shells. It's different every time, and the whole time my brain is trying to focus on all that. Like I see the little bees that have landed on the beach. I feel everything about my body when I'm doing that. When I'm running, when I'm breathing hard, when my heart's pounding, when I'm being highly athletic, it's a big connection for me to feeling alive. And it's very hard for me when I cannot do things like that, which is another long story about things that have happened to me in my life. But I'm going to stop there because I think we've covered it pretty well, and I'll see you in the next video.